Hello again. This time, both music and book fans, because I'm here to talk about Led Zeppelin and The Lord of the Rings. A lot has been said about the influence of Tolkien and his Lord of the Rings trilogy on Led Zeppelin, and I'm going to play a bit of a devil's advocate here because I believe it's been greatly exaggerated. Now, it is very true that both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings were very popular and rediscovered by young people in the late 60s and 70s. And I say rediscovered because, The Hobbit was published in the 1930s and Lord of the Rings in the 1950s. I also exclude the Silmarillion here, since that was published in 1977 after the songs we're going to mention were recorded. Okay. So, for example, just as an example of how much it is taken as a matter of fact, here's an interview with the actor Elijah Wood, who was a Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. This interview was from the time when the Lord of the Rings films were being released.
Were you aware of all this Lord of the Rings references that was in the Led Zeppelin songs and fantasy rock in the 70s?
Oh yeah.
What's your impression of that?
A lot of heavy metal is based on sword and sorcery and riding on your steed against the great army. So many Zeppelin songs make reference to Mordor and ring wraiths, and like you've got the Battle of Evermore, which is a classic sort of reference to Lord of the Rings.
And Misty Mountain Hog.
Yep.
So as you can see, it's given as a matter of fact that there's a large amount of Tolkien lore in Zeppelin's music, and it's repeated a lot. And even here on YouTube, there are several videos that say the same thing. But let's look at specifically at where this Lord of the Rings Zeppelin connection comes from and why it's been given way too much importance. Okay, there are 3 songs that make reference to the Lord of the Rings. That's right, just 3. And I do stress make reference to, since none of them are really about the Lord of the Rings. The first one is Ramble On from Led Zeppelin 2, where the lyrics say, "How years ago in days of old, when magic filled the air, 'twas in the darkest depths of Mordor, I met a girl so fair, but Gollum and the evil one crept up and slipped away with her." Now here we have mention of Mordor, the land where Sauron, the evil one, dwells, and also Gollum, the vile creature who first appeared in The Hobbit and then plays a pivotal role in The Lord of the Rings. This lyric has baffled Lord of the Rings and Zeppelin fans since there is no fair girl in Mordor, much less any mention of her being captured by Gollum or Sauron. Some have speculated that the girl is really the One Ring of Power, but said girl will certainly not be deemed fair since it is an evil object created by Sauron. So that's a bit of a stretch right there. What I really believe is that Robert Plant was merely playing with words and evoking a magical atmosphere, writing about being a restless spirit that needs to ramble on. And he merely name-dropped Gollum and Mordor and the evil one to give the song some flavor and evoke the ambience of the Lord of the Rings. The remaining 2 songs are from Led Zeppelin 4, Untitled or Four Symbols, as some have called it. So let's tackle the easy one first, which is Misty Mountain Hop. Okay, the Misty Mountains are a mountain range that the characters in Lord of the Rings must cross to get to their destination at Mount Doom in Mordor to destroy the One Ring. However, as stated by Robert Plant himself, this song is about living free, smoking marijuana, and being given a hard time by the police. There is no other Lord of the Rings reference within the song itself. Again, the Misty Mountains perhaps, were mentioned to invoke a marijuana smoke or something like that, and also a magical atmosphere. That magical, free-living, free-loving atmosphere of the 60s and early 70s. Now for the big one, the Battle of Evermore. Now you must say, this song is obviously about Lord of the Rings. It mentions the ring rats. What more do you want? Well, that one word, and I do say that one word, is the only reference to the Lord of the Rings, in the entire song. The rest of the song only evokes a battle, which has some magical overtones. There's some you know magical language being used. But again, this is Robert Plant just evoking an atmosphere. Here we have an example of these lyrics. Oh, dance in the dark of night, sing to the morning light. The Dark Lord rides in force tonight, and time will tell us all. The Dark Lord is Sauron? Maybe, maybe not. From later in the song, the pain of war cannot exceed the woe of aftermath. The drums will shake the castle wall, the ring wraiths ride in black, ride on. The ring wraiths are, of course, the Nazgul, the undead kings who do Sauron's bidding. It should be noted that there is no chapter in The Lord of the Rings called the Battle of Evermore. However, some have speculated that it might be based on the events in the third book in the trilogy, The Return of the King. And so, though I will concede that the song has the most Lord of the Rings feel to it, with its folky melody and Sandy Dennis's ethereal vocals in a call and response with Robert Plant. However, in these books that I'm going to show you right now, When the Levee Breaks, The Making of Led Zeppelin 4 by Andy Fife, also Dazed and Confused, The Stories Behind Every Song, and this very small book inside of a CD case, which is simply called The Making of the Led Zeppelin 4. Okay. So I have read all of these books, and needless to say, I have also read The Lord of the Rings, and I am familiar with the entire Led Zeppelin catalog. Okay, so let's see what these books say about the Battle of Evermore. Here from the book When the Levee Breaks. Okay. Plant had always been fascinated by the wars England fought with its mainland neighbors, Scotland and Wales, and he'd been reading about the Scottish wars and writing lyrics that vaguely pertained to his recent reading. He also revisited the lyrical territory of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, references to which had most notably appeared earlier in Led Zeppelin II's Ramble On. Also from the book, the lyric is most obviously influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien's classic trilogy of books, The Lord of the Rings. There are references throughout the song to the Dark Lord and ring wraiths, and the opening words even refer to the Queen of Light. In Tolkien's story, the Dark Lord Sauron searches for a ring of power that will give him absolute dominance over the known world. His pencil envoys are 9 undead men, the ring wraiths or Nazgul. The Queen of Light is the elf Galadriel, who offers sanctuary and counsel to the band of warriors and hobbits who have agreed to destroy the ring sought by Sauron. Now here, the author is jumping to a conclusion. There is no real evidence, anything said by the band themselves, that the Queen of Light is actually Galadriel, though one could very well think that. It's not that much of a stretch. Okay, but also, the song lyrics combine these references, I say again, with others that were influenced by Plant's reading matter of the time about the border wars that England waged with its Celtic neighbors during the Middle Ages. Okay, so it was those books that Robert Plant was reading about those wars with Scotland and Wales that also greatly influenced the Battle of Evermore, not just the Lord of the Rings. In this book, Dazed and Confused, the Lord of the Rings references are not even mentioned in the section for that song, for the Battle of Evermore. Instead, Plant had read a book about Scottish history before going to Headley Grange, where they recorded the album, and described the Battle of Evermore as more of a playlist than a song. The rest of the piece goes on to describe the musical elements of the song, not not exactly the lyrical content. And now here from Led Zeppelin 4, some notable Tolkien-esque lyrics from Plant, as on Ramble On. Plant dug into Tolkien's remarkable novel, The Lord of the Rings, for its inspiration, although this time it seemed as if the lyrics take the listener right into the novel. With dark riders and desperate heroes, it paints colorful audio images of battlefields and great quests. Okay, so there is a, of course, they mention that there was an influence there and references, but that's a very big difference from having the song based on the Lord of the Rings. Recounting the story of the Lord of the Rings. It just evokes the feeling of the books. The last song I will mention is Stairway to Heaven. Now, this does not have any Lord of the Rings lyrics in it. However, a lot of videos and essays have stated that this is based on Lord of the Rings. I believe the band themselves have said that it is not. In neither of the books that I have shown you, is there any reference to Tolkien, um, or rather, any reference that the band themselves intended the songs to be about anything Tolkien-esque. And in this very small pamphlet, which came included with this magazine, this guitar magazine from 20 years ago. This is when Led Zeppelin 4 was celebrating its 30th anniversary, so it's quite a while. Here, Jimmy Page talks about the making of Led Zeppelin 4. Again, the whole Tolkien thing is pretty much glossed over or not even mentioned. And in this one, they examine, in this little pamphlet, they examine specifically the lyrics of Stairway to Heaven. And they do so in also the music of Stairway to Heaven, the lyrics and music, but they do so in a very scholarly way. And there's just a lot of hogwash also here. A lot of just putting your own narrative on the lyrics. When Robert Plant himself has said that much of the lyrics, came as a bit of a stream of consciousness. You know, you know, he just wrote them down as they came to him. There's no really great meaning other than to evoke, a dreamy state of mind. All right. Having said that, like I said, I love the Lord of the Rings, and of course, I love Led Zeppelin as well. And at first, I also thought that there was a great connection there, but there really isn't. There have been much more Lord of the Rings influence in later music, specifically heavy metal, and specifically even more so in power metal. There are bands that have written entire albums based on Tolkien's work. Like for instance, Blind Guardians, Nightfall in Middle Earth, all right, and many many others. There are countless bands who have taken their name from uh, either characters of the Lord of the Rings or places in those novels. All right. Well, that is my opinion here on this subject. Let me know what yours is. Thank you very much for watching. Keep reading and keep rocking.